Hi everyone, welcome to the Real Estate Tax Tips channel. My name is Cherry Chen, a chartered professional accountant located in Oakville, Ontario, Canada. And I'm on a mission to become the Google map for hardworking Canadians seeking financial freedom. And today I have a super special guest and we cross paths in a different world. My other secret identity, just like all the superheroes, they have a secret identity. My secret identity is I work in the nonprofit world and I work as a CFO for a nonprofit organization. And today's guest, Jason Burggraaf, Executive Director of the Greater Ottawa Home Builder Association. And I met in that particular world in my other identity. So welcome, Jason.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Sherry. It's great to get back with you again.
Greater Ottawa Home Builder Association just won an award, and you yourself also won an award this year for being you, essentially, be in your role. Tell me a little bit, because I think this in my current world, in the real estate tax tips world, I don't know if a lot of people would understand what the role is for your organization or home builder association in general, because different municipality has different home builder association, and then there's an Ontario Home Builder Association, and then there is a Canada Home Builder Association. So what are the roles that the home builder associations do, and who do they represent?
Sure. So home builders associations in general, it's an industry association, right? So it's representing members, builders, land developers, renovators, and then everyone who's associated with the residential construction industry, lenders, engineers, consultants, lawyers, everyone who's involved in that process overall. And the idea is essentially you're kind of bringing everyone together to act as a single voice for that industry in whatever the locale you're in, and we happen to be in Ottawa here. So the main thrust of what we do is more government relations related to the municipality. And like you said, there's one for the province and there's one for the federal government as well, because each level of government has its own jurisdiction and has its own interests in housing policy, and they all affect what gets built at the end of the day. So you have to have representation at every level of government. So what we do is in and out, day in, day out, we work on the policy side of housing with those respective governments. And I get a chance to, go to Queen's Park and speak on Parliament Hill every once in a while as well to
Oh,
represent kind of
wow.
the Ottawa context. So it's kind of, your voice in front of government, whatever level that happens to, be the one acting at the moment, representing that, private market industry.
Oh, wow. That's very interesting. I thought all we could do is really just to complain. And it turns out there is a process other
I
than just complaining.
I did. Admittedly, we probably do a lot of complaining as well, for sure. But the nice thing about being involved with an association such as ours is you really get that voice at the table, and you tend to get it like beforehand. Like we do a lot of pre-consultations before new policies, changes, and bylaws come out. They do stakeholder consultations. We're, a stakeholder. So we kind of get that early information and get a chance to talk with the staff who are developing those policies, understand why, give them kind of the constructive feedback as to here's how you want, we understand the goal you want to accomplish. Here's the impediments or the barriers that we see from a practical standpoint. Here's how we think it should be modified, right? Which in the end, we want to get to a policy that's kind of a win-win-win for everybody, right? A win for the government in terms of what they want to
Yep.
achieve, a win for industry in terms of being able to actually do the thing they do, which is build housing,
Yeah.
and then a win for the public so that they actually get housing and an appropriate amount of housing, and we can relieve some of that housing affordability issue that we're under right now.
Wow. So that sounds fantastic, because I really thought that as regular average Joe like me, we would only be allowed to complain. And I had no idea that we as average person, if we want to have our voice heard, we would be able to join essentially an association or industry association, and then essentially voice our concern to you, someone like you, and then have you represent the majority of us and our interests, and then provide that feedback to the government. And in your case, it's the city of Ottawa or sometimes Ontario
Yeah.
government, and to share our essentially our want and desire and what works and what doesn't work. Oh, that's really, really cool.
No, it's a much more efficient system than say having, we have say 100 home builders,
Mm.
large home builders in Ottawa. It's much more efficient than them all doing their own government relations, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I had no idea until I joined and I started my secret identity. Then I get to be exposed
Right.
to this world and it is really, really cool. Since you are also wearing a cape representing all the home builders and also everyone that's related in the real estate home builder industry. So tell us a little bit about the policy that came out that is essentially in favor of us as average Canadian investors, home builders.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the more prominent ones, especially for kind of your audience right now,
Mm.
is the HST rebates on for-purpose rental. So
Yep.
it's about a year and a bit old right now. Um,
Hmm.
and of course, you essentially you have HST or PST, GST, depending on where you are in the country, and you have to do a fair value assessment, right, on the value of your property if you're building or
A
or
rental. Yeah.
substantially renovating one, right? And
Yep.
for a purpose rental. So
Yep.
what the government has decided to do, and then the provincial government followed, at least here in Ontario, was to say, okay, we want to
Hmm.
incentivize you guys building that sort of thing. So we're going to rebate the full value of that. So essentially, you're not paying HST on your rental on a construction or a substantial renovation of a for-purpose rental property. The trick, though, that I really want to highlight to people is there's a threshold for that, and that's 4 units.
Hmm.
If you're building, you're tearing down a dilapidated home or what have you, and you want to put up a small unit, even say, just a few units to get that rental property income, it has to be a minimum of 4 for you to qualify for the rebate or for the full rebate. And that's important because in a lot of cases, in Ottawa right now and a number of municipalities, you can't build 4 units as of
Hmm.
right, on a majority
Yep.
of lots, for that purpose. And that's across the country. So
Yep.
what we're seeing is the interplay between the government's doing one thing to try to incentivize a certain type of housing and a certain number of housing units, right? In terms of
Hmm.
for-purpose rental, again, a minimum of 4,
Yep.
but other levels of government not necessarily putting in place what's needed to effectively build that, right? So
Oh.
Ottawa right now, and a lot of places in Ontario, right, only have a minimum of 3. You can build up to 3 as of right, and you have to apply for that fourth, and you're not necessarily going to get it. So that's why we see the federal government, when it's doing its housing accelerator funding agreements directly with cities, saying
Hmm.
one of those conditions is we want you to do, you have to put in 4 units as of right for your zoning. And that's, especially important because then it ties into your HST evaluation. So it's really important if you want that rebate, make sure that you're zoned to get those 4 units and make sure you construct at least that many.
So how is that coming along then? Like right now, like it's a classic government problem, right? Like you put out a policy saying that, hey, like you don't have to pay HST on any of the stuff if you build 4 unit and up, but then the municipal government are the one that's controlling the zoning. And right now, by right, you only have 3 units. And it's such a huge disconnect. And it's a classic problem because it happens. This is just one of the many examples that's had
Yeah.
like that they are causing this confusion. And so my question is then, so through I guess through that opportunity fund that the federal government is giving to the municipality, they are encouraging the municipalities to essentially adopt that 4 unit by right policy change. Have you seen any of those change happening?
So essentially every municipality, I believe there's well over 100 agreements with the federal government now on the
Oh
accelerator
wow.
fund. Have
Yeah.
they, in principle, to get that funding, you've agreed to implement that zoning. The
Mm.
issue is how long, it was saying you're going to do it is one thing. How long before it actually takes effect and is in place is another. Like Ottawa is going through its more comprehensive zoning bylaw right now, and that's well in process, but it's also still going to be another year right, before it's
Wow.
done. And we'll probably maybe explore that a bit more at a bit later. But that 4 units they've agreed to isn't in place, isn't effective right now, right? So you can't do that as of right at this moment, even though the federal incentive is there.
That is so crazy. So we got one announcement a year ago, but even using Ottawa, which is a more progressive city, it will still take another year. So like a 2 year lapse before everyone has a right to essentially build 4 units on their own property. Now, my
That's right.
follow-up question is that when this HST policy change that just got announced,
Mhm.
one of the criteria is that it would not apply to property that are converted from essentially from a regular residential home to another residential, like to 4 unit residential home. Is that still the case? Because back then, when I really got into looking into it, I remember seeing, hey, like you can convert from commercial property to residential, and then you will qualify. And as long as the conversion resulted in 4 units, and
Yeah,
majority of the units are being used for residential long-term purpose, not for Airbnb or any of the short-term rental.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, but at the time, it also says that residential conversion from 1 unit or 3 unit to 4 units is not qualified, doesn't qualify, meet the qualification. I don't know if there's any update since then.
So it's so the catch is a substantial renovation.
Mm,
So
mm,
you've got to, under your municipality, you've got to qualify as a substantial renovation from, say, a single family home, right, into
mm.
those 4 units in order
Oh,
for it to qualify. So you're going to have a significant addition right to the house or something like that. And the division, usually you want exterior doors, right, for all 4 units, that sort of thing. Yeah, if you're kind of more, if in the eyes of the building code and the municipal officials, you're more kind of creating rooming houses or kind of small little apartments within the existing building that you have, you're probably not going to qualify either. It's really new construction, a really substantial renovation, and or like you say, conversion of use.
That's awesome. Oh, thank you for pointing this out. Like, this is a very interesting topic. I just had no, like, in my little mind, I'm only thinking about tax, right? I never
Right.
thought about, hey, like everyone, actually nobody has a right to build 4 units. And so this is a really good information, good piece of information. Now, are there anything else like tax related that you would like to share with us policy wise?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we're dealing with now, because it's coming up on a year anniversary for Ottawa,
Mm,
and I know there
mm,
are others in other municipalities across the country, especially larger
yeah,
ones. There's a vacant unit tax.
yeah.
And essentially, the idea right behind that is to incentivize owners of properties to move that property into a long-term rental situation as opposed to short-term, like an Airbnb, right?
Mm,
So, I'm not sure about rules on across the board, but say in Ottawa, if you have a cumulative of 183 days of vacancy in a
mm.
property, that's considered vacant, and you're subject to a registration and a tax to do
Yeah.
that, right? And right now, even actually every residential property in Ottawa has to declare whether it's vacant or not. Like as a homeowner, I have to mark down in my house whether it's my primary residence, is it occupied, what have you.
Yeah.
So it's the municipalities, trying to incentivize not having short-term rentals essentially, throughout the city. We're coming up on a year on that. We're hopefully going to see some kind of reporting as to, how many properties were actually declared, how much tax, was actually charged on that, how many refunds they probably did because a number of people, probably didn't make the declaration in the first place.
Yeah.
So we're gonna see about that, and that's kind of one again, being an association, right? That we're now doing the follow up on that to kind of see what's the impact, what's the worth of doing
Yeah.
that, how many units actually came into the long term rental market
As
because
a
of these
result. Yeah.
efforts, right? And there's a bit of a cost benefit analysis to do there as well. So it's going to be interesting to see. And yeah, sorry, go
I
ahead.
do I do have a personal story to share. One of my best friend's mom has a friend in Ottawa, and she bought a townhouse right next to her friend, her best friend in Ottawa, but she lives in Toronto. So she just left it vacant for really like she just wanted to go there, have a place to stay when she visit her friends.
Yep.
I would have never done that because having a property carrying an empty property is nothing, like does not make any financial sense to me. But because of this vacant home tax that's being required by City of Ottawa, she paid the tax for the first year and she's now renting it out
Yeah.
because she felt like, well, like I'm not going to pay, I don't remember how much, like
It's
10, $20,000.
it's 1% of the assessed value
Yeah.
of the property.
Yeah.
Like it is
Yeah.
not an
So
insubstantial sum.
absolutely. So it's on the property value. It's not on your net equity. So it
No.
is a lot of money. So she ended up renting it out. And so 100% it is achieving it in a certain extent, but like you have to, I would say, cost hassle to like all across the board just to cash that fee. And that fee is how much? Is it worth it? And then
Yeah.
there are people behind the administration too, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, that'll be one of the things, right? Did they collect enough revenue from the tax even just to pay for the people who had to administer the bylaw in the first, in the first place? That'll be one of the fundamental questions for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
somewhat related, again, in Ottawa, and there are other places. Now they call it different things, but in Ottawa, it's called a vacant property bylaw. So, and it works kind of similar in terms of it's a vacant property, so a vacant piece of land. And it kind of evolved from property standards bylaws, especially in the inner core, right? Where you have a piece of property, it's either an abandoned building, right, where it's not occupiable right now, or a vacant piece of land, a lot that can become a nuisance to neighbors, right, because it's not being used. So they also have a similar kind of program there where you have to register that piece of land, pay a yearly fee on it as well. Again, as sort of an incentive to try to get you moving on that. The issue we have in Ottawa, and I would caution again across the country as we see it kind of go along, is they're changing kind of the scope of properties that get caught up in that property bylaw. So now all new parcels of land that are on the municipal rolls are subject to that vacant property. So in our case, we have, say, home builders, right, who are building a subdivision in phases, right, as you often do. That second and third phase, fourth phase, especially if you're getting started, right, all those individual lots that are now assigned and have on the municipal rolls, those are all subject to this vacant property bylaw registration and fees as well, right? So it's becoming the government trying to address these vacancies and trying to get people to move on vacant properties are also contributing to increasing or decreasing housing affordability, because ultimately the fees and the cost of that registration and everything else that you administer that piece of land is going to go into the final sale price of that house whenever you end up moving in the end, right? So there's a lot of as you kind of talked before, there's kind of a lot of cross interests that happen.
Oh wow, I had no idea that like I think I've heard of it from a fellow investor. When I was visiting Ottawa, I was having a tour at his building. He's converting maybe an 8 unit to a 12 unit building.
Mhm.
He's creating housing supply and he's
Yeah.
making it beautiful. But this type of Victorian style building, which was built 120 and 130 years ago, there's a lot of retrofit. You have to tear everything down.
Yes.
And this process itself, like even with municipality, it takes years, like not years, like
It
some
can be
time
years.
just to
Absolutely.
get
Yep.
stuff done, right? You have to remove some of the tenants and then you have to like empty because it's not safe, not because they're kicking them out,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? Yeah. And then you have to get the permit. And I remember him talking about hey, like if I prolong this for a little bit longer, then I have to pay this tax
Yep.
to the local government, which is crazy in a way.
Yeah, and it's especially important too if you're trying to assemble pieces of land, like
Yeah.
adjacent, you're trying to assemble two or three adjacent pieces to do a bigger, you want to build a low-rise apartment building, right, with 40,
Yeah.
50 units, right? And you're
Yeah.
trying to assemble the stretch of land. All of those things come into place. as well. So I'll wrap up kind of those pieces though on one thing we did actually just or we're going to accomplish tomorrow, funnily
Oh,
related to both to the vacant unit stuff
yep,
is tomorrow, as we're taping this now, Ottawa
yep.
Planning is going to be talking about modifications to its demolition control bylaw. So,
Mm,
and essentially right now, you can't get a permit to demolish until you also have a permit to build the next thing, right? That you're going to put
mm.
back on that property. What we've been able to accomplish and it gets passed tomorrow, and I won't hopefully jinx it because it's no one's going to see this until until after it's done.
After, yes.
Until after it's done, right? Is they're going to divorce that connection between you'll be able to
Mm.
get a demo permit without having to have the building permit set up, so that you can say if you have a derelict property, knock it down, do your site prep, what have you, so that we can kind of separate those two processes, which will actually be very helpful and kind of speed along the construction.
Oh, wow. I had no idea that they are like married to begin with, and
In
it's a
it,
good thing.
in Ottawa, it is. Again, I'm not sure about necessarily every municipality. I would assume most probably do have a connection to do that.
Mm.
But we're it's breaking those things up in terms of not having one have to be part of getting an approval for the other is really, helpful because it will speed up, you do your site prep and other things. It'll help the situation for sure.
Wow, that's a lot of bureaucracy behind like
A
getting
vacant
through.
piece of
I
land.
because it takes time and it takes some dedication and courage to commit to an old property. And now then you go to the government and they say, well, you gotta wait these long or like pair up all I got all these permits before you can do a thing. So I'm glad there is home builder association all
We
across to
try, we
help break
try.
those barrier. Before our recording, we talk a little bit about development charge. And it's an interesting topic because I know development charge across the board has increased substantially. Tell us a
Yes.
little bit about it.
Yeah, so I mean, essentially, a development charge is an applicable charge to any new development, commercial, industrial, residential, what have you. And the
Mm,
idea is that it's supposed to pay for the cost of new infrastructure to service that property.
mm.
So essentially, very, very quickly, every municipality essentially creates a project list of all the things it thinks it needs for growth over the next, say, 10 years.
Yep.
Roads, sewer pipes, parks, all that sort of thing. And then it basically breaks it out, what the cost is for each of those projects, and then breaks that down by, okay, over the next 10 years, we're anticipating X amount of people, X amount of new housing, and then, that's the denominator that the big cost gets run by. So in Ottawa right now, we're just going through a new development charge bylaw,
Mm.
which is just it got approved back in May, but it's being revised because they didn't have their infrastructure master plan ready yet. That's only being approved at the end of October. Then they'll revise it yet again in the spring because the transportation master plan, because of COVID, got
Oh.
delayed. So we've got this new DC charge, right? That's coming up, and it's going to be revised twice over before a 360-day calendar, right, has gone by. And then on top of that, there's indexation, right, to deal with inflation, and at least in Ontario. There's indexation on your DC fees every year as well. So on top of several reiterations of the fee, we're at least looking at 7.8% increase by October, and then whatever happens next year as well. So very quickly those fees kind of jump up, right? And it's something that every municipality for the most part struggles with, at least large ones. I mean, we still have smaller municipalities in Ontario, at least, that don't even charge a DC at all, right? It's the cost for infrastructure is collected in a different manner, and that's kind of one of the interesting things that's becoming a bigger conversation, right? Because people are recognizing the significant factor of DCs in terms of the sticker price of a house. In Ottawa, in a single family home, it's creeping up. By the time we get through all that stuff that I was talking about before, we're probably going to creep close to $60,000, right?
Oh, per unit.
for a
for a
single
single
family
family.
house,
Yep.
right? And then there's very depending on the size of your home, or one bedroom apartment, two bedroom apartments, townhouses all have different fee structures. But in, say, the GTA, Milton, I think, in specifically, and I apologize if I got it wrong, but it's well over $100,000 already, right? So it's a
Oh my
significant
God.
barrier, like a big chunk, right? Easily, could be 25% of the cost of a home in the end of ends. Um, and that's a big portion of why there's such an affordability crisis in Canada right now, is homeowners having to take on that cost on an individual basis, right? I mean, you're essentially, paying your share of that through your mortgage, right? You're the one financing the costs of that in the end. And there's starting to be kind of real conversation at every level of government, and especially you see it at the feds and the provincial level of, is this the best way to pay for those kinds of services?
This is a funny conversation. So, if you don't mind me asking,
No, please.
when do you pay for the development charge? Like at the time when the sale close, like it's all done, or at the time when you submit the application of through the construction period?
So when you see a house up for sale, or
Mm,
even for a new construction, right? And it's, say, $500,000, right? The
mm,
DC cost is already included in the
yep,
cost of that unit that you
yep,
see being advertised. The
yep.
builder pays the DCs when they pull the building permit to construct it.
So it's at the very beginning.
Yeah, you go through
Yeah,
your
yeah,
development approvals
yeah, yeah,
process,
yeah,
right? So you're
yeah,
doing all your studies and your fees
yeah,
through that and everything else. And then when you are ready to build and you pull the permit from Building Code Services in order, to allow you to do it, that's when you
yeah.
pay your DCs.
So this is funny because I'm an accountant, right? In my head, like, okay, the developer actually pay for these development charges like way ahead, right? Way before people get to move in.
Yes.
And guess what? Like I'm guessing. I'm no accounting, no public accounting specialty. I actually have to consult with my other client who does a lot of like accountability on public services entities. But to me, they're recognizing their revenue today and they're spending their revenue today.
Right.
Even though the basis of calculating that is based on like, hey, like I need these much services per unit and all these in the future. But that revenue is not set aside. They're collecting it today and it's being used in today's deficit. Like there's that disconnect between, hey, what it's intended to do versus what is actually being used.
Well, I mean, perhaps I'd have to kind of think about it for a minute, but like all the infrastructure that is already there, right? Like when you're
Mm.
doing all you're prepping that land, all the infrastructure is already there. So that service part has already been done, often done by it's some municipalities do it directly, but at least certainly in Ottawa, and I'm sure in most major municipalities, the builder themselves actually do that work ahead of time, right? So there's a lot of money. The DC is You're really paying the DC so that, as a guarantee to the government, that if you don't do the work, they can afford to pay for the work to be done, right? Like it's almost like a guarantee to a certain degree. And I'll add a wrinkle, unfortunately, as I kind of talk it through, is you can defer your DCs if you're doing for purpose rental.
Oh,
Now, I'm not, forgive me, I don't know if there's a threshold to that, but you never know. But you can defer your DCs till occupancy on a
mm,
for-purpose rental project, but you are paying interest on that.
oh.
So it's a calculation on your pro forma as to whether that's advantageous or not.
But then if you are like your DC is charged what, like calculated at the end of like at occupancy time, then it will
No,
be like 7 or 8% more.
well, the DC is frozen at the time you pull the building permit.
I
The
see.
the rate the rate is still frozen at the same time, but you do
Mm,
have to pay an interest on in between that pulling the permit and getting your occupancy.
wow. I just
pay
had
pay
no
for insurance.
idea. There's so much like intricacies when it comes down. Not, I guess it's not just on development. It's just like housing market.
Yeah, for sure.
Just the intricacies behind like, hey, the municipal how municipality government is interacting with the federal or provincial policies and all these development charges being charged and being calculated and how it's impacting housing affordability because
Yeah.
I felt like it was so far removed, but now you quantify it in Newton, it's over $100,000. That's like that is a lot.
Yeah, and the really unfortunate thing, I mean, to a certain degree, you have to pay for these services, and they're new, there's new infrastructure and what have you. I mean, in Ottawa, I would argue about some of the projects that were included, including an Olympic level swimming pool that new home builders are paying the majority for. Like, is that related to growth? I think we could have a reasonable argument to that. But the issue is that it also contributes to price escalation on the resale level, right? Because
Mm,
you're talking about a substitutable good. So, a home that a resale home and a new home that are essentially the kind of the same in terms of number of bedrooms or space or what have you. That resale home is also being the cost of that is going up because it's comparable to that new home, and the new home has all these input costs, right, that are contributing to it, as opposed to the resale, which isn't, right? So we used to have kind of a bit more of a disconnect between a resale price of a similar home to a new home, but that's really not the case anymore, right? So
mm.
that's also been a big factor on affordability on the resale side.
Wow, thanks for shedding so much light in this area that's like
Oh, you're welcome.
relatively unknown, at least to me. In my little mind, I only know numbers and taxes, and I just felt like, wow, there's so much behind what we're looking at. And I'm grateful that there are home builder association out there, and there's award-winning home builder association out there to at least like really put some light into these complicated topics.
If I'm not, I have to admit, I'm not a planner and I'm not an economist, but I like to dabble in all those things. So I'm happy to share for what it's worth.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you so much for coming on. If anyone have any questions about the Ottawa market or Home Builder Association potentially joining so that they can have their voice heard, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, you can reach out directly to me if you like at Jason, Jason at GOHBA.ca. It's GOHBA.ca, or visit the website GOHBA.ca as well. And there's all the info there on joining as well.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the talk. I need to invite you, come back a couple years later and
Anytime.
then talk about any policy, all the policy update. I can't wait. I can't wait for this 4 unit by right type of zoning being pushed out that hopefully in 2 years we'll see that.
Now, yeah, and I mean, I would just double check on, your wherever you happen to be located. Hopefully, somewhere already in place.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.